Hey everyone, it's Martin Schneider, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, covering growth, automation, growth ops, rev ops, CRM, all kinds of awesome stuff.
You forgot the agents.
Oh, well, agents are everywhere. It's all agents now.
And I'm Larry Dignan, Editor-in-Chief of Constellation Insights, and we're your co-host for CRTV episode 108. Nice. We're going to talk about the latest news. Martin has some customer success research to talk about. And I'm going to interview Dr. David Bray, talk about AI, boardrooms, and all sorts of other policy kind of things. But first, let's just kick off with the news. We have 3 questions this time. Look at us. We're putting a little structure into this.
Structure. Wow. All right.
So first, let's just talk about what we learned from enterprise buyers in 2025. Feels like this year's over already, but it's not.
Yeah.
So I sort of look back on all the customer stories we've done this year so far, and I think the most shocking thing is still no one can plan ahead more than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's resulted into all sorts of messy quarters, messy outlooks, just messy everything. But there were a few themes that popped up. One, we talked about agents. Agentic AI is a big one. We sort of have this weird split. Vendors are all agentic, all in, all talking about it nonstop. I'm pretty sure I've heard RPA mentioned as an agent. I've heard all sorts of things where I'm kind of just scratching my head. Is that really an agent? And then on the customer side, notably the BT150, the folks we talk to every quarter, they're skeptical as hell. And it's very fascinating to watch. And I'm not sure how it works out at the end of the year, but I'm pretty convinced the actual agent AI deployments are going to be more about a 2026 story. Not sure if that's your vibe. What are you thinking, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing significantly is a number of factors causing pauses, right? I mean, because you've got macroeconomic, political factors that are making people at least stop for a minute. And then what I would call the innovation fatigue, when you mentioned the vendors are all in and it's all agentic, and we get to that, and we'll talk about it in a second, but it's, Agentforce, for example, was released as a concept in September. Not even a year ago, right? And we're already at this mode where you're at the 3rd major iteration of it. Whereas in CRM, ERP, other, when you think of the traditional side of the application, even in SaaS and cloud deployments, you might be doing quarterly updates, or you might even be able to wait until you consume those until you're ready for it. But this is like, it just keeps coming faster and faster, and it's a lot of it is fixing or improving on things, but people are like, I don't know where to start if the next thing's coming literally 2 weeks away. So there's this kind of innovation fatigue, I think, that's causing people to stop and say, let's look back at our foundational AI strategy. What are we trying to do? What are our use cases? Where does like generative and agentic come together? And then where does it come together with our human workforce? Like, what is our hybrid strategy? Because it's almost never about replacement yet. And it's like, where do we bring that in? What are the jobs to be done? What are the ROI measurements? And I think the vendors are looking to address that, but there's still a lot of, like you said, when we talk to, all these end users in the BT150 and beyond, there's a lot of there's skepticism, and then there's a little bit of confusion, a little bit of that fatigue. And then the core thing, which always runs through, is the data.
Right.
Do we have the volume and the value to get to precision decisions, precision actions that agentic AI promises, right? And the answer is usually no to maybe at best. And there's never, like, few people have a resounding yes, we trust this. I can go let anybody build an agent and it's going to just work, the way that you're going to see the demos and things like that. That's not really the reality, right? And that's just what it is. But I think next year it'll get better. As you see both acquisitions and other things around data management, data quality, ETL, and integration by the big players, and those who already have it all and have good stories around it, the Oracles of the world and things like that, I think we'll get it. But there's this mixture of like, which companies are eager to consume, which ones can, which ones should, right? So
Right.
it'll start to filter out, I think, in a little more positive way after Q4.
So then the other key theme that's popped up in our customer stories has been practical AI, which I think is almost a reaction to the agentic part, where you're looking at plain old enterprise AI, not even generative. Like, what can I do? What can I optimize? How much more productive can I get? And this gets down to just brass tacks with the supply chain. We still don't know what the hell these tariffs are going to look like.
Yeah,
we don't know. And I mean, I just listened to the FedEx call, their earnings, and it's like the only thing we can guarantee in 30 to 90 days, everything's going to look different. And they have all the data on their supply chain, their network, everything else. They're creating these digital twins. And fortunately for them, they can move faster than manufacturing because they can sort of reroute planes and, do the logistical stuff. Where manufacturers, it's not easy to get out of China to Vietnam in a hurry. So that's something you're talking, and it falls into that broader theme of resilience and productivity. And I almost think that almost seems to be like a running theme that's counter to the agentic stuff.
Yeah.
Focus on what works and what delivers the return, because agentic feels like it's a beta at best.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, like data insights that a human can easily take action on outside of an automated workflow or any of it. You're not doing it for them. Just telling me, like, again, with global sourcing, with being able to go more direct to consumer by connecting more data points where manufacturers are able to reach out to consumers and figure things out, and then work on supply chain optimization and order management and things like that are a little more that are AI powered but not agentic, not even generative. Nothing's being there's no text being created. It's just literally working with data and I think that practical AI, it's almost, we were starting to get good at that and getting excited about that, and then generative and agentic kind of hijack the story,
right?
And I think to a detriment, right? Because it is, when you look at like teleological cycles, right? You need to get to these things. You need to kind of crawl, walk, run. And I think, the crawling and the walking is really important for a number of reasons, because that's where you get the data foundation. And that's what's, that powers the other stuff. And first movers, super, early adopters, most of them weren't even there yet, right? And everyone just kept this onslaught of like, we can't be last for this. So everyone went crazy with it. So, but the practical stuff, I think, is the one that's going to drive value. It's going to drive a perception among employees, even, that AI is their friend, not their enemy, or going to take their job. And I think more focus on that, as with more dipping the toe in the agentic waters, is probably a better policy or strategy.
And our next question that's kind of ties into all that is Agent Force. You were on the Agent Force 3 call, saw some of the back channel. I wrote up the news. I guess the big question I had was, when does this thing go GA? And you talked about innovation fatigue and all that good stuff. So what was your take on Agent Force 3?
I think with 3, they're doing a lot of the things. I know, not to confuse people. I mean, it's obviously GA, but what you mean by GA, right, is I think this is getting it closer to there, because when you look at Command Center, when you look at some of the abilities to understand the performance of the agents and monitoring, not just in what individual agents are doing, but some multi-agent capability, the orchestration of agents. I know that the capabilities are there for multi-agent, multi-platform. They didn't talk about it much. It was a very Salesforce focused, event, right? But I do know that in the background, they're making the partnerships, and they're also enabling with Command Center and other tools, the ability to understand that like agents are going to talk to other systems and other agents the same way that employees do, right? And that's and mimicking that is important. If you're going to really talk about digital labor, you really do need to be able to, access, applications, because, as a worker, even if I'm, I love Salesforce and it's the greatest thing that helps me as either a salesperson or a marketing person or a support person or an ops person, I still probably use like 14 other apps to get my job done every day. And if the
Right.
agentic flows are going to be even close to end to end, or even like complete processes, they need data, they need actions, tasks, management, other things that either come from, push to, or both, and take action in other systems. So that's the future. Agentic is like, everyone's got to play nice, because if you really are going to replicate what humans do, but do it actually faster and hopefully better and more efficiently, instead of tabbing to another app or opening that and cut and pasting things like that, being able to automate that, really does need to be it's like multi-agent, multi-platform. We heard ServiceNow talk about that a lot at their Knowledge event, and you're seeing others do it as well and talk to it. Others are just like, that's all they're doing. Like Boomy's story is just like, we just want to be that platform where the agents talk to each other, right? But Salesforce, I think, gets it. Didn't make that much noise about it, because I think people are still trying to figure out, can I, how do I better like manage who creates agents in the organization, what those agents do, how they perform, all that stuff,
Yeah, I think we're just going to have a whole lot of sprawl ahead. So that's all we have for the news this week. But stay tuned for Martin's take on customer success and his latest report, and then my conversation with David Bray.
Hey, Martin Schneider with Constellation here. Wanted to give a quick update on some of my latest research. I've got a new market overview on the customer success market. It's called Customer Success is an All-Season Sport. Now, what does that mean, right? Well, customer success software and the platforms that enable customer success are in a kind of interesting transformation mode right now. And why is that, right? Well, companies in this post-pandemic, post-subscription economy world really do need to think full journey, right? We can't just think of our customer success organizations as renew order takers, right? Getting the renewal and that's it, right? They need to be more strategic. They need to engage throughout the life cycle and really understand the customer in new ways to broaden adoption, to uncover expansion opportunities, and to just really, obviously, elevate the customer experience so that the renewal is like the worst thing that can happen, right? So we reduce churn, but it's really about growth and expansion, right? Now, so what does that mean for, both the vendors that are developing the software, and for those organizations, those customer success organizations that are consuming the software, right? Well, again, when I talk about that all-season sport, what I really do mean is full journey orchestration of engagement that optimizes growth, right? So where we used to see a lot of these tools were really just kind of like CRMs that manage different milestones and different processes around more expansion and renewal, those kind of customer success metrics that matter. It's really broadened out to cover more, of the life cycle, really outside of core success, really kind of customer health scores and data analysis in new and exciting ways, and leveraging AI there to better understand and be proactive, right? Where, a lot of like the kind of hard coded structure of a customer success tool was like, okay, here's what you do, here's when you engage, here's our milestones, here's the subscription, and here's when you might engage. It really needs to be, much more dynamic and proactive, right? And product usage tools and product usage data is being implemented inside these platforms now, because again, it's not just for digital entities, right? It's not just about tracking SaaS logins and clicks, how people work with your website if you're even a B2C company, and how people work with your mobile applications if you're any type of app, any type of business these days. It is really important to understanding behavior, understanding adoption, and understanding those signals that might be positive or negative. So again, you can improve your health scoring capabilities to allow your customer success managers and other stakeholders to be more proactive. But also, new tools like education capabilities, right? Learning platforms inside the overall customer success platform. Because what does that do? That helps onboarding regardless of what industry you're in, which again, improves the time to usage, the time to value, the time of perception of value, and then the overall stickiness of an application or any product that you have, but also allows, your, the customers of these customer success platforms to monetize education, right? A lot of these have even commerce capabilities in there, which is really cool. And then one last element that's being added to these to really help that full journey and that much more engaging and immersive kind of experience is community management tools, right? So again, where we think of, in the past as customer success as this is like a CRM for CSMs to get all the letters in, really community management, because then how do you actually look for advocates? How do you support and understand and make sure that people have product knowledge and are helping each other and creating that vibrant community, which then lends itself to, again, product stickiness, advocates, loyalty. And again, where the renewal is an afterthought, you're really helping people exchange ideas to then think, oh, here's a new use case. I can actually, expand and get either, if it's SaaS, maybe new users or a new module or things like that, driving growth, driving revenue, driving retention, and doing all that. So just to kind of review, the end users need to be thinking more full journey and really up-leveling their customer success organizations to be strategic and really orchestrating engagement full life cycle. It can't just be, hey, let's pop in around renewal time, right? That's no go on that, right? But then for the leading application providers in this space, more and more they're getting to those 5 elements I talked about: core success, health scoring and data analysis, product usage, education, and community. In my research, I kind of talk about all the whys and what fors for these areas and what's important and what's changing. And then in the market overview, I actually talk about the key vendors that are also in the customer success shortlist, which will be updated very soon later on this summer. So if you're in the customer success world, if you're a CSM, if you're a manager, if you're a chief customer officer, or if you're a growth leader and you're really trying to think about how do I take this holistic approach to managing growth and doing that inside the install base, inside the customer base, I think it's a great piece of research for you to check out. It's available on ConstellationR.com. Again, it's called Customer Success is an All-Season Sport. Available now. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Larry Dignan from Constellation Insights, and we're here with Dr. David Bray. He's chair of the Stimson Center and a AI 150 member. Thanks, David.
Thanks for having me, Larry. Great to be here.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about strategic assessment and competitive positioning and how boards should be thinking about AI investments. It's kind of a weird topic right now because there's so much hype and just, let's get real, kind of utter nonsense. Like step one is just AGI. Like, do I really expect a social media company to create something that's super intelligent? It might be a tough sell. So what do boards need to be thinking about right now?
So I think you hit the nail on the head. First is there's a whole lot of hype, and there's also a lot of excessive doomism too. So I think piercing through what is actually real and what's possible, that's the first step. I think there's a lot of fear of missing out, but sometimes that fear of missing out might actually motivate companies to take a misstep. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't do AI, but you should sort of almost scale your bets and go back to what are we really trying to do well and focus on that. And then say, given what we're trying to do well, what tools, including AI, and there's multiple approaches to AI. There's computer vision, which is completely different than generative AI, which is completely different than, say, an expert system. And then there's also active inference. And so part of it is saying, what do we want to do well? And then what are the measured bets we want to make? And then finally, you can't really map out a 5-year plan just because of the rate of technological change that's happening just as in AI, but also in biotech and space. And so I think boards need to actually be much more nimble and strategic, which may not be the case that all boards are used to when they were used to setting 3 to 5 year plans and actually sort of maintaining those plans as opposed to updating them every quarter as the world changes.
So what should that new time frame look like?
I think given the pace of what we're seeing, both in terms of technologies and what's possible with technologies, but also just the nature of the world and geopolitics and economic instability, I think it's going to be set a maybe at most 9 to 12 month plan, but be ready to update and revisit it. I would say a quarter at least, but I would actually feel much more comfortable updating it every 4 weeks, simply because again, just the rate of change that's happening in the world, that's both from technology and the world, 4 weeks is almost a lifetime nowadays.
So, would you say that boards have been part of the problem? Like, if I look at those companies that, they already have AI tech debt, right? Because they jumped in with whatever was popular early 2024. Everything's evolved. They bet on one LLM or whatever was snazzy at the time. And that's largely because the board was breathing down the C-levels' necks. So are the boards part of this issue, and can I really rely on them to dig us out?
Well, I do think when boards get too much into the business of what the company is doing at a tactical level, that can be problematic because it actually hamstrings your executives and the staff from doing what's necessary. A board really should be at the strategic level and not at the tactical level. At the same time, I think the value of a board in a changing world is actually asking questions of the executives and actually asking the executives to ask the rest of the company, what are we not doing that we should either sort of improve, or what are we doing that we should let go of? What's the legacy things we should let go of? And so when boards get tactical, that can be problematic. Like you said, when they can sort of say, yep, you got to do whatever the LLM of choice is at the moment. But if they actually ask questions and say, what are we doing that we need to let go of? But also, what are we not doing that we need to be aware of, or what could impact us? And then lastly, I'm actually seeing when I work with boards right now, interesting enough, even though generative AI has some of its flaws, it's generative in nature, it's occasionally going to go off the rails, it can actually be really good to sort of serve as like a messenger for what things are we not thinking, what things do we red team on ourselves that maybe our competitors are doing, or things like that. And then you have your human experts say, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense. But it's almost like using the AI to see around corners and let the AI be the messenger, because sometimes companies shoot the messenger, and then the humans sift through and say, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense.
So I'm still a little hung up on the time frame for boards and planning. If you're looking at a 9-month window, isn't that the same as just being the public company that's running from quarter to quarter, or is that okay? I mean, it seems like there's short-termism, and then there's I totally get it though, because everything's changing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you want to have longer time horizons. The challenge is I think anyone who thinks they can tell you what the world looks like in 5 years is probably fooling themselves. I mean, I can give you sort of a range of options, but I would say we live in interesting times. I think there's a quote, whether it's, I don't know, it's probably some past Soviet that says sometimes the world, nothing happens in 100 years, and then other times 100 years happens in 1 year. And that equivalent is that this is a time in which there is a convergence of multiple revolutions in terms of tech happening that's having seismic impacts both on what companies can do, but also I think it's creating a lot of anxieties and uncertainties in marketplaces that are also uncertainties and anxieties in communities and ultimately individuals. If we look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, I mean, not just the United States, but 61% of the people around the world right now are saying they have a moderate or high grievance against one or more groups. And again, this is not just US. There's others that say 40% of the respondents say it's okay to do an act of violence because of that grievance. And so I think if anything, companies need to be aware that this uncertainty is not just happening to them, but to their customers and to the people they work with. And if they can find a way to actually both give agency and choice back to people, but also a sense of we can navigate through this, we can get through this, even though it feels turbulent. That'll actually be customers that are actually fans and actually quite loyal in a world that is changing quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I just listened to the FedEx CEO talk, and they didn't give an annual outlook. They gave an outlook for the next quarter, and he said in 30 to 60 days everything's going to change anyway. And their model is get efficient as possible, retool the networks. They're already everywhere. And he said, we have a digital twin of our network, and we can sort of pivot ahead of manufacturing because we can move faster. But it's just sort of that adoption that, hey, we don't know what's going to happen next week, let alone. It's kind of bizarre.
It is, and it makes you wonder, how do we get out of this? I mean, if this is currently what we're experiencing, something's got to give. Something's got to give. And it's unclear to me. I mean, I think, if anything, I wonder about the absorptive capacity both of organizations writ large as well as individuals. Will we just be so exhausted that that we'll have to take a breath? But again, I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful that we get through these sort of crossing the chasm moments. But it does raise interesting questions, which is if this is the new pace of change, I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. And it may actually call into question basically how do boards most effectively help as a governance mechanism for the C-suite.
And what does that governance look like when you're basically making up as you go along?
Well, hopefully it's not making up as you go along. I think if anything, you know, I think it's. I often talk about the importance of decision elasticity. So when the board meets, it sort of says, what has changed since we last met? What's new? Has it impacted any of our decisions? And then now as we set the next sort of North Star we're aiming for, decision elasticity is how wrong do we have to be in what we're aiming to be our different targets for the next six weeks, 6 months, whatever it might be, whatever the North Star we're aiming for, how wrong do we have to be to then come back and pivot? And then maybe we're actually saying to the executives, if as you go forth and execute what we are now hearing from you as the plan that you have provided us as executives, let us know if we need to actually come back because maybe the marketplace has changed, or we were assuming that the Pacific was going to be relatively stable, and guess what happened in September? A funny thing happened in, I don't know, South China Sea. Whatever it might be, sort of saying, you know, when do decisions need to be sort of revisited? When are they robust? And then ultimately, again, I think the only way we get through this is that you actually have to empower the entire organization, not just the C-suite, but then the C-suite empowers, you know, their VPs. The VPs then empower the folks on the edge, because the edge is going to sense when things that we thought were true about the world are no longer the case. And so then how does that quickly percolate? And I do worry, especially for large organizations, that there's a decision time between when something is sensed over here that's not working or needs to change, and by the time it percolates up to the top, that could actually be fatal or deadly to a company. And so the question is, how do organizations, you know, the reality is any company beyond 160, 170 people cannot be flat, but how do they increase their sort of decision speed in a way that isn't centralized, isn't top down, but also can be those early warning networks when we thought we were aiming for something over the next 2 quarters, and now we got to pivot.
So what does that mean in terms of the data? Do you need more data from the edge and sort of leap over everybody to get, I'm just sort of trying to figure out the data, the signal, the noise.
100%. Well, so the challenge with data, as you know, Larry, I mean, in some respects, there's always a risk that humans can cherry pick data to tell a story. They can say something happened or didn't happen based on the cherry picking data. And even then, let's say we assume nobody has, you know, intentional cherry picking, but the data might actually be either biased or it might be incomplete. And so we think something's happening when in fact something's not. So I think what we really need, and this is where, you know, when I see companies coming out and saying, we don't need humans anymore, I'm like, I think what humans do is they help provide the context for what data and possibly AI, as it helps analyze it, are seeing. And so I think future organizations really are trying to turn to their humans and say, look, there's so much going on. You can only be in so many places at once and pay attention to, you know, so many of our clients and partners. Let the AI, you know, tell the AI, I want to be alerted if something sort of changes or something happens. You know, maybe something has changed in terms of one of my customers or partners, or maybe something's happened in the Suez Canal that can impact our supply chains, whatever it might be. And then those machines are tipping and cueing a human to pay more attention and say, oh, yep, that matters, or maybe not. Or maybe I'm going to call somebody. I'm going to call one of our clients or partners and say, how's it going? But it's really this idea of collective intelligence, because, again, I have not seen a robust enough AI system of any flavor at the moment that can make sense of all context in a way that doesn't need a human. Now, again, humans are also fallible, and we have tons of cognitive biases. But I think that by combining a mixture of humans and machines, and especially encouraging independent thought, and so you don't want to force all your humans to see the world a certain way, else that's also death. That can then be tipping and cueing. I mean, I come from a world in the intelligence community that if we force everybody to think the same way, we're actually doing a disservice to what we're supposed to be doing. And so I hope future leaders turn to their company and say, here's where we're aiming. And again, we may update it every 3 months or every 6 months, but here's where we're aiming. Here's the boundary conditions and the constraints. And as you explore this space, both as humans, but also as humans using AI and other analytical tools, if you think there's a better way to get there, we'll actually reward that.
Is that the new competitive advantage?
I think so. I 100%. I mean, if you look at it, it's the only way to adaptability at the moment is the only way to thrive. And I wish we had a better metric for scoring the adaptability of companies beyond just profit, because as you know, I mean, there's several times where a company will look profitable, but in fact, it's actually making itself less adaptable, less resilient, and then it goes off the cliff after 6 months. And so we need to figure out what are those metrics of adaptability, or what are those ways that a board can assess that the company is actually improving its adaptability and pivot speed as opposed to diminishing it.
Now, I can't help but wonder, do we need a whole new generation of boards and leaders?
A mixture.
I mean, at universities, we're not exactly teaching adaptability.
No, we're not teaching adaptability.
It's not even a unique human condition, right?
True.
Like, we all resist the change. You know, in tech, we kind of see a lot of it. So allegedly, we can handle it better than the average bear, but we suck at it too.
Yeah.
Where do we grow these people?
Well, and I think part of the trouble is MBA education. I mean, you know, I got a degree from a business school, but my biggest frustration was business schools were saying that managers tell people what to do. And in the world that I come from at the time, it was bioterrorism, and then other worlds, you know, it's always turbulent. And I would say anyone who tells you what to do in a turbulent environment is probably going to be out of date for how the world has changed. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we not only have to like have a different generation of boards, but again, I want to have a mixture, because I don't want to go with the latest fad. I think it's actually sort of saying, you know, what is the value here relative to what we were doing? But I do think we need to teach people, you know, how do you actually survey what you're hearing and what you're saying and take it all in, as opposed to saying, I've got all the answers, I've got the only answers, and I'm going to force it on everybody else. And in some respects, it's almost like a market-based mechanism of better approaches, better ideas within a company. But as you and I know, a lot of C-suite people, unfortunately, have been sort of trained and maybe indoctrinated to not let go of control and not to encourage people to disagree with them. And so I think that part of adaptability is actually, like you said, that mind shifts. And I think those are going to be the companies that thrive in 5 years, that we look back and say, which are the ones that made it through all this change, were the ones that actually encouraged thinking differently in a marketplace of ideas and new approaches in their own company, as opposed to getting rid of people or making everything automated, and then being surprised when what they automated, or that RPA process, was out of date within 6 to 9 months.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Good stuff.
Thank you, Larry. As always, appreciate it.
Well, that is a wrap on episode 108 of CRTV. Watch for our next episode in 2 weeks.
That's right. In 2 weeks, you'll have co-hosts Holger Mueller and Liz Miller. They'll bring you episode 109 for CRTV. In the meantime, follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter at ConstellationR.
And as always, don't forget to subscribe to Constellation Research on YouTube, and definitely subscribe to CR Insights at constellationr.com. That's where Larry's always putting out, you know, the latest and greatest reactions, sometimes even from yours truly and other analysts at Constellation, around what's happening in tech right now. So always, you know, subscribe to those insights. Keep an eye on the website. Always, you know, it's fast-paced, and Larry's always on top of it somehow magically.
Magically.
That's right. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. Oh, 3. Hey there, this is Martin Schneider, Constellation Research. Not that. Not that. Okay.
Bring in the energy.
Yeah, bring in the energy.
So this time we're going to kick off news, and then we're going to talk to our. Wait, what are we doing? All right. So we'll just start that all over. Was that your thumb that went up on you while you talked?
Yeah. Well, I did this, and it like made the thing show up. It's like one of those like reaction things.
Dude, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was Hannah doing it or not. Hannah's way of saying hurry up already.
Hurry, get the fuck out.
It wasn't me, although I should try that option in the future.
Due to a lot of kind of macro and unique reasons. Actually, I'm going to restart that. Hold on.
That's right. Next week, or wait, 2 weeks? What week? All right, hold on.